Welcome to the Minding the Gap podcast video series brought to you by Behavioral Sciences of Alabama. I'm Paul Waukee, licensed counselor and new amateur rapper.
Excellent amateur rapper.
Well, I don't know about that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm with Dr. David Barnhart, and we are getting ready to talk about stress and relationships and the pandemic and how that has maybe exacerbated some stress and relationship tensions. We're in the same house with our spouses and our partners, and sometimes that creates more stress because we're not used to that time together, and we're all already on edge. You know, the pandemic has created this disruption and of the flow of lifestyle that we're used to. So when we've talked about this before, when we have these accumulated influencers of our stress that are built up, including the normal things, and then you add the pandemic on it, it makes us more vulnerable to responding in ways that widen the gaps instead of close them. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Dr. Barnhart, what do you think?
Yeah, Paul, are you saying that when we get married or when we're committed to a long-term relationship, it's not happiness forever thereafter?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's interesting.
In our lives that we have to deal with all the time, and we don't always agree, and sometimes we do things that hurt each other, and sometimes we don't have the same interest, and sometimes we disagree on ways to do things, and sometimes things happen that we have to deal with. So we talk a lot to couples who are having trouble, and we talk about some principles that help to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
The first one being assuming the best of each other.
Oh, there's a thought. Instead of attributing some negative character flaw.
Right. That's what, and you've said that several times as I've gone back and watched some of the videos that we've done. You know, when we get stressed and we respond in a certain way with anger or with some kind of decision that may not be helpful in the moment, it's not a character flaw. This is a human being trying to deal with this really strong feeling in a way that protects them in that moment. And often we're just not thinking straight. We're just not thinking right. We're just not considering the other person's feelings. We're not really accessing our entire brain that like we would like to. And so it's not a character flaw.
Right.
It is a response that is born out of survival. And so assuming that someone has got my best interest at heart, that we're together, we have these good memories, we have a lot of the good positive experiences together, assuming that person didn't wake up in the morning and decide that they were going to piss me off is a really good thing to start with, because if we can't do that, then everything becomes attributed to, you're just trying to do this. You're just trying to do this. And who can live happily that way?
Yes. So that is sometimes referred to as negative sentiment override. So we begin to get this, we get flooded and are upset. We're upset with our partner. And so you and I might say the amygdala gets hijacked. And so now we're vulnerable to any negative thing that might come up, or even sometimes our partner does something positive. Okay. So they bring, so I got you this, I was in the store and I thought you might enjoy this, so I brought it home for you. And they give it to us, and we're thinking, you're only giving this to me to, butter me up because you were so wrong before. And this is just your attempt to make it all better, make it all go away, and really sweep it under the rug. Yeah, how'd I do? So even positive things our partner does,
because you're already assuming that they're not, you don't really care. You're just out for yourself. You're some negative character flaw. You're this or that. And we talked about the criticism before. Using criticism never helps. You're always you're this way, you're that way, you're selfish, you only care about yourself, you don't really care about me. That's a criticism, and it's just not a helpful way to respond to anything.
Right.
The complaint method, where I feel this way about a certain specific situation, and I would really like for you to wait and listen to me finish my sentence before you cut me off, is not only expressing it in a way that's about the person and not about the criticism, but it's also giving the other person the solution. This is what I want you to do. It would really mean a lot to me if you worked on that. And when someone says something like that, it's a lot easier for the other person to go, oh, I know, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
But when you're going, you're always this way, you're ready to defend yourself. What you're thinking about, what about all these other times when I wasn't that way, No, I wasn't, and then it becomes this back and forth. So, but we've talked about how easy it is to get into that exchange when we're upset. Why? Because we're flooded. Because we have these chemicals that are flooding, and we're really upset, and we really are connecting a lot of these things to a really negative feeling and thought. And it may be exacerbated by an old wound.
Sure.
It may be exacerbated by an old wound. You take somebody who's wasn't seen as a child, and they just weren't paid attention to, and they were ignored, and they were invisible. And then they go out and they're driving in their car, and somebody cuts them off, doesn't see them, and you get this huge reaction. They didn't even see me. That person probably didn't wake up deciding, I'm gonna get in front of this person, and they probably just are bad driving. It happens all the time. But we have this big reaction to things that trigger a feeling that's connected to some kind of pattern of not being respected or not being seen or something like that. And the more we're aware of that, of those triggers, and because everything is a symbol. When we live through life, something happens and it's a symbol of something that means something to us. And we've talked a lot about being aware of some triggers of maybe past hurts that maybe are still living in the moment.
Yes, and so part of it is to create that awareness. And when we're working with individuals, we'll begin to name the triggers. We start accumulating them and recognizing them by doing things that as simple as keeping a stress log. And that actually helps our brain, if you will, to recognize the trigger when it comes up. And
it puts in the gap there, it puts, I'm writing it instead of responding in an angry way. I'm taking a minute to decide, this really upset me, and this is what triggered me. This is my thought. This is my feeling, and this is my number 1 through 10 of how upset I am. And now you have an opportunity to decide what to do with it. It's not just this visceral feeling and reaction that's probably not going to be helpful.
Right. If we don't have a step to take if we haven't programmed ourselves with that goal. I'm going to look for the trigger, and I'm going to start writing them down. It's an alternative to automated. We talk about the automaticity of everyday living. What you and I are talking about right now is how this automaticity can get us hung up in a pattern of negative sentiment override. And a negative emotion is also a trigger for memories of other times when I felt the same way, which then brings up more episodic memory, and I have even more to say. And we talked to couples about, well, when we start talking about things, we bring in the kitchen sink. It's not just this incident, but it's all kinds of other things that come into it. And that's part of that automaticity. It's again, as you said, it's a trap. It's automated. It's not a character flaw. It's how our brains work. So how do
we get locked onto it?
Right. Can I intervene? Can I begin to step into the gap and go down another pathway?
And it's hard to do it by ourselves. Sometimes we need help to do that.
Right.
So, and it's okay to say, this is big. This is too much for me. It's just too strong. I need some tools. I need to develop some skills. And it's not a character flaw for me to ask for help to do this.
Counseling helps with that some of the time. If you've got a third person in the conversation, it creates a new stimulus condition, and we are more likely to be on our better behavior when there's a third party present. And
because we're thinking through it.
Yes.
We're not just doing what we kind of conditioned ourselves to do over and over again, and we're going, what is this other person going to think of that? That's sometimes a good thing.
Right. It is
kind of provide some accountability. And again, the whole idea is to stop and think. It's strategy. This is strategy. This is, so we talked about sports. When somebody, the enemy, what is the enemy for sports? It's the other team's trying to beat you. But in a relationship, you're trying to make it good. The enemy often becomes the other person. And they're not the enemy. The enemy is this feeling and this situation that's hard to deal with. And it's all these accumulated things that have come up that created trauma that may even have to do with the other person sometimes. It may not be happening at that moment. It may just be that the other person was just kind of not thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we're all in this same kind of soup, going through the automaticity of everyday living. And so we could be responsive.
So the other person just, going to do something or, going about their day, and they really don't have any idea that is a trigger for the other person. But we've talked about this before, where in the absence of information, when we get triggered, our minds piece it together and put the puzzle together. That's what this means. You're doing that because this, having to do with me. And oftentimes, they were just hungry, or they were just, whatever.
Yeah, like our children, we say the acronym hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or stressed, HALTS. It could be one of those things.
That's right. Yeah. So stopping and assessing What's the correct information that I need to base my reaction on?
Before we
Can I think
started,
about this differently?
before we started the podcast today, we were talking about triggers that we're unaware of. And so triggers can be some interaction, but they can also just be something that's we may have an episodic memory that's not in our conscious awareness. Just for example, here, this is pretty straightforward, but people who are having feelings of anxiety or depression, and they recognize that the situation has something to do with the level of anxiety, and they will say something, and you've had this happen. I wake up in the morning and nothing has happened, and then all of a sudden I feel anxious. Well, what's bringing that on? Why am I all of a sudden feeling anxious? And if we think about learning and survival and the automaticity of everyday living, to me, it's logical that if you wake up and you feel anxious, that waking up to the day could be anxiety provoking as just the stimulus to be anxious. Because when you think about, well, when am I anxious? It's usually not while you're asleep.
No, it's when we wake up.
Exactly. And so when you wake up, your brain, Lisa Feldman Barrett is a neuroscientist that talks about how the brain predicts what energy is going to be needed. So you wake up and you're anxious during the day. So you wake up and you have anxiety because your brain goes, not that your brain's talking to itself, but it recognizes it's daylight. Okay, it's time to get ready to fight or flight, and so it becomes an automatic kind of response. And then with that extra bit of cortisol, stress hormone floating around in our brains, we're more likely to be triggered by virtually anything that puts a demand on us. So we go down to breakfast and our partner says, are you okay? And we answer, yeah, what's the matter? So we can have triggers that are not so obvious.
It just happened, and the person doesn't know what's going on, and and it may have to do with, because we've talked about just different things that make us more vulnerable to stress, to anxiety that influences that. Just worrying about the pandemic, our brains working correctly and going, this is a problem. What's going to happen? That's not unusual. We have this different life. If you have any health problems, if you're not having enough fun in the day, if you're not looking forward to something that you enjoy doing, if you don't have people to talk to, if those things all make us more vulnerable to stress in general. And then you have this other person that's there that's not always doing what I want them to do, or so on. And so it can become, it's more difficult because there's this feeling, you're already on edge, and something happened that triggers that, and we need some kind of relief from that. And what happens typically is when we get upset is, and there's another person there, we get on to them about it, or we get angry because it's a relief. It's a short-term relief of this feeling that only perpetuates it. It feels like it's solving the problem, but it's really not.
So what can we do about it?
That's a good question. Well, the first part of that is just being able to recognize that this is just what's happening. I've got these vulnerabilities, health, stressors in my life, whatever those are. I've got these vulnerabilities. I've got a past experience that makes me vulnerable to triggers. And then this relationship, there's triggers that happen. I got to be aware of them. And then the next part of that is kind of coming up with a plan to stop the automaticity, to be able to and be able to step back and make a judgment about what to do with this feeling that you can't help. You can't help that feeling.
Could we just avoid each other?
Well, that would be a temporary solution. But the problem with that is that the thought continues to go on. Wherever you go, there you are.
That's true. Isn't that really true?
Yeah. So it's true. And it's hard because and a lot of people that are listening to this and watching this, are going, yeah, hopefully they're going, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I agree with that. Hopefully people agree with that, because it does make sense, but it's hard. It's really hard to implement it.
So we need to find some ways of being together
that are good.
Okay.
So
what would be some examples?
Okay. So part of that would be finding something that you both enjoy doing together. And doing it on purpose. That's one of the things that I learned from you real early on in marriage counseling, relationship counseling, is when there's tension that's happening, don't talk about the problem. Just don't talk about the problem. Save it for when you come to the counseling session, then we'll talk about the problem.
Okay, talk about that some more. You mean we shouldn't be doing problem solving?
Well, if you've been conditioned to solve the problem in ways that make it worse, then you don't need to be going and doing that by yourselves.
You mean if we keep doing the same thing over again,
it won't yield any different results? So
right.
That's part of it. Is just we're not gonna focus on that, because that's not helpful. It's about what's helpful. Not that it's not important. Not we want to avoid it forever. Just need some help navigating through this problem.
Okay, so we're not trying to sweep it under the rug.
Not trying to sweep it under the rug.
Okay.
But working on the relationship, that's important, because when you're having a problem, if you feel connected, if you feel like you're in step with your partner in a lot of other ways, it's a little easier to talk about it, because you're building up trust and you're building up the bond together.
Okay.
So doing things together and getting used to being together and having a nice time makes you less vulnerable when the problem comes up that you're going to overreact and it's just going to go back to square one.
Well, that sounds a lot like, almost like having a date or something.
It is. It's like having a date. And part of that too is, especially if you have a good history, you want to talk about, remember that time we went here and, before we got married, or when we got married, and we went to this restaurant over there and then we had this thing. That's a pretty good memory, So talking about why you chose each other, what is you like about each other? What did you do that was fun? Yeah. And when you're talking about it, guess what's happening? You're reliving it. And you find yourself feeling good.
My goodness,
yeah, that was pretty fun. That was great.
So sometimes we can time travel. We can go back in the past and find those things that were these experiences that we had that were positive and enjoyable. And, it just reminded, I don't know why this pops up into my head, but my wife and I went out for an anniversary meal years ago, and had a good glass of wine, or something during the meal, and in a pretty positive mood, and I leave a tip that was way beyond 20%. Okay, I mean way beyond.
The generosity
And
grows.
I did it accidentally. And okay,
Okay.
but I did it, and she said, "Did you mean to give that?" And I said, "Well, I meant to be generous." And my grandmother would be proud of me, because she always thought we need to really do a good job of tipping these people because they don't get paid that much. That was my grandmother. Um, a positive memory. I goofed. It was a goof on my part, but a good memory. And
Yeah.
and
Get a chance to think about your grandmother.
exactly all that stuff. All the good
right,
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
All of right together. You get like
Yeah.
we've talked about this too. Is that neuroscientists have researched the brain, and when we are purposefully, mindfully having positive experiences, our brains change. It makes new connections. It's more flexible. It's physiological, and the feeling is we feel better. If you think about during the day, I remember I used to work at a place that was an outdoor program, and it was just beautiful. It was in the kind of in a valley, just kind of see hills around, just beautiful. And I just remember being next thing, who I got to talk to on the phone, go, talk to somebody across the way, come back. I'm outside going around, I was like, after a couple of weeks, I hadn't even sat and noticed this scenery because I've been so focused on. We don't have to work on the next thing because it's the natural thing to do. What's next? What are we going to do next? What's happening next? What do we need? Tasks do we need to do? We have to practice thinking about something that's happening that's positive, because it doesn't keep us alive, right? Just sit and think about something positive, but it sure does make us feel better.
Yes.
And it's good training for our brain. So I keep forgetting the guy's name. It's Rick something. What's the
Hansen? Rick Hansen.
Hansen, yeah. He came up with the HEAL method. So the HEAL method is have a positive experience. That's the H. Purpose. Think about, okay, mountains. Look at that. Look at the color of the leaves on that. That's awesome. E, expand it. Make it bigger. Oh, the leaves are beautiful. And look over there. Look at the sunset, and it's bigger. We're noticing more things. A, amplify it. Feel it more. I can really feel this positive energy that's just this beauty that God's creation is before me, and wow, this is really awesome. L, link it to other experiences. I remember when I was camping, the first time I ever went camping, with this group, we were outdoors, and it was great. And so now we're experiencing this moment. We're also connecting it to the past moments, and we're really accentuating the emotion of it and the broadness of it. And that practice we can do in relationships.
Yes, right.
We're having a good moment right now. This dinner is really good. I'm really glad that this restaurant makes this sandwich.
Yeah.
And wow, this is really, and I start going through that, and I'm link it to our past together. When we were, our kids are little, this happened. Oh yeah, that was so funny when they did that, whatever it is.
So it helps us to be resilient. And that's the part of it is, it's the being able to appreciate the moment and be in that moment and make those connections with the person, the relationship, the lifelong experience together. And it's also, it helps us be aware that we have a lot of positivity associated.
That's right. And when something is negative, it dominates if we let it.
That's wired in.
Dominates. And it forgets all these other good things. It just forgets that, and so that's what we have to really, really practice being mindful of. these good experiences, because the even if there's not many negative ones, then they create this big feeling if they're hurtful enough, or they're in there. And so and the whole idea is taking the whole, deciding what to do based on the whole relationship, not just this bad piece of it influencing us. And if we're not mindful, then that's where we're going to go, because that's the protective part of our minds.
We have to learn to be creative in relationships. We human beings habituate to everything, meaning habituate's a fancy word for we get used to it, right? So we get used to something. So we can have a positive experience or relationship with somebody after 7 or 8 years. It's not brand new. It can't be novel. It's not novel. And so we learn to use creativity and active listening with our partner to use this creative approach, right, to keep ourselves refreshed and to engage in these exercises that actually contribute to the long-term feeling of closeness. And
right, and that's another chemical thing. We have oxytocin that we produce when we're having a good moment with somebody. Mm-hmm. When we're really feeling close to somebody and we're talking about something and it's a positive thing, we have chemicals that are going through. It makes us feel better. It makes us and we feel bonded to it. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot in maybe a marriage where couples just kind of get into this habit, they do the same thing, and there's less oxytocin that's happening because they're just habituating to just being there, and it's not really, mm-hmm, there's no newness in it. There's no newness in it.
Right.
So we talk about going out to dinner, taking a trip, mix it up a little bit.
A little novelty.
Pandemic. Mm-hmm. We can't travel is not safe. Going out to dinner, doing different things become more difficult. So now we're in this house together, and all we're doing is we're accustomed to being in the same place. But if we're not doing something new and creating some interesting thing together, talking about memories could be one of those things. Mm-hmm. We have to actively produce those chemicals, or else eventually we'll start thinking about the negative stuff. It's just the way it's just we'll become more vulnerable to that.
Yes. So sitting in the room together and doing our own thing is okay some of the time, but we also need stimulation. Our female colleagues did a podcast recently that was quite good, talking about the new normal, right? The social isolation, and coming up with creative ways of self-care, but which includes relationships. They did a good job addressing that. And I think looking at, this is a time that requires some creativity.
It is, no question about it. No question about it. So, and as long as people are mindful of it and are making an attempt to do it, they're probably going to find things.
Yes. We have such capacity to solve problems and to be creative if we make it a goal.
Make it a goal.
We can definitely wrap our minds around it, and we can generate the activities and the conversations that we need to help us be closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if people are having a hard time figuring out what to do, and they're just in this pattern of conditioned responses, it's okay to reach out for help.
Absolutely.
It's okay to ask for somebody to help them out.
Right. Well, thanks for this conversation. I'm gonna go home and see what kind of creative ideas I can come up with my spouse.
I'm really looking forward to the next board game that I play with Carolyn, because
Yeah, you playing Pandemic?
she's been kicking my butt. I haven't been playing that. We've been playing. It's called Ticket to Ride. It's a train game where you have destinations, and she's been kicking my butt lately. I gotta get it evened out. It's not.
Yeah, well,
pretty competitive.
Yeah, well, if you pick a partner that's smarter than you are, that's the way it works, dude.
I know, it's really frustrating sometimes. It's you're really proud of them and all that, but you're like,
yeah,
maybe that's smart.
Yeah, my wife's a much better mechanic than I am. So that's good. We need to be able to appreciate these things.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I look forward to the next.
Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and please subscribe to the web to the videos on YouTube, and comment, rate, review. We want to hear about topics. Have a great week, everybody.
See you, Paul.
See ya.